Yahya here from Israel met the actual Yona Saber, the person the book is about, who is a teacher of, hi Gilda, who is a teacher of in Aramaic, and at one point when he left Iraq, the teacher was 12 years old. They checked his pockets and he had 3 1-cent stamps of King Faisal. And the custom officer in Iraq gave him, scolded him and told him, you're stealing from the property of Iraq. I mean, a poor 12-year-old boy. So Nazar went to meet this Yona Saber last year in Los Angeles, and he gave him what he had already. He had 1-cent stamps of the king of the era, and 70 years later, and he gave him the stamps. He replaced the stamps that were confiscated from him. I'll say it later, but since I'm just starting to talk now. Hi, Amy. Shall I start?
It's 2:05. Do we give a few more minutes? Because I know Gladys Catan said she's joining.
She's here.
Where?
Hey, Glad. Here's a 1-cent stamp. Look at it. Hayim Yahya is showing us the stamp of the young king Faisal. This is the stamp that was confiscated from Yona when he was leaving Iraq in 51. And Hayim Yahya Nazar gave it to him 70 years later, last year. Isn't that a lovely story? And Sami Surani also is very much in touch with Yona and Ariel. So it kind of continues our history. Shall I start?
Yeah, we're ready for you.
Okay, hello everybody.
So Lisette needs no introduction. She's going to talk to us about My Father's Paradise.
Yeah. So the book, I'm assuming many of you did not have a chance to read it because of the libraries being closed. So the story is, as I said, about Yona. It's written by his son, Ariel Sabar. It all starts when the Assyrians in North Iraq brought in the Jews from Judea. Is this our phone? Sorry, put it off the hook. No, it's not our phone, it's somebody else's phone. Okay, sorry about that. It all starts when the Assyrians brought in the Jews from Judea to the Assyrian Empire in 734 BC, which is in northern Iraq, Kurdistan, and it's in Zaho. These people, many of them settled in Zaho. Zaho is one of the villages in northern Iraq. When we grew up, we didn't know there were Jews there. And the Jews were just uplifted a few years before. The descendants of these Jews stayed in northern Iraq for 2,700 years. They gave up Hebrew for Aramaic, which was the language of the Assyrian Empire then. And Aramaic is also the language that Jesus spoke. So it's important to the Christian faith as well. By 1951, these people, the Kurdish Jews who lived in Zaho and around the other villages, still spoke Aramaic. It was their mother tongue. They were the inhabitants of a biblical landscape, really. For them, Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark had run aground, was to the north. Queen Esther and Mordechai were buried in Hamadan in Iran nearby. Abraham was born in Ur, which was in mid-Iraq near Babylon. The Assyrians themselves, the Assyrian Jews themselves, had by then several prophets. One was Jonah, who was buried in Nineveh, Nahum, who was buried in Al-Qosh. These 2 shrines have been destroyed by ISIS in the last few years. And there was Daniel, the prophet Daniel, who was buried in Kirkuk. In the 17th century, there was Asinat Barazani. She was a daughter of a prominent rabbi, Barazan, in Zaho. She was educated by her father. And she was the only one left who had the training, enough training to run the yeshiva after her father and her husband died. She became a formidable leader in Jewish education, a fundraiser, a Kabbalist, a poet, sage, and a miracle worker. Actually, she really was a first woman rabbi. So that was 17th century. So we consider the Kurdistan very backwards, but they had the first woman rabbi probably in history. The Babylonian Jews called her Talmudic scholar. In the 1900s, the Jews of Kurdistan by now, they lay low. They did not have any political aspirations. They got along well with their Christian and Muslim neighbors. They were weavers, they were manual workers, fabric dyers, jewelers. They were experts in cultivating mountain agriculture such as almonds, pistachios, chestnuts. And they excelled in harvesting some sweet grit that settled on the branches with the morning dew. And that was the manna that our forefathers had to have in the 40 years in the desert. We had the manna in North Iraq, in Iran, and we still had manna sweets in Iraq, and they still have it in Iran. They still sell it in the Iranian stores here. In Zaho, the sanitation was primitive. They had no electricity. The death rate of the children and babies was staggering. And Yona was born in Kurdistan to Miriam. She was a teenage mother. They married the kids very early, the girls, as soon as they reached puberty. And his mother, being very young and having a first-born daughter, Rivka, she was not able to give her milk. So they gave her to a Muslim wet nurse, and the Muslim wet nurse disappeared with a baby girl. And it was a very traumatic loss for Miriam. As for Yona, his father, Rahamim, he was the son of the wool dyer and an aspiring businessman. He was slowly but surely improving the family business with his two brothers and increasing their wealth in the area. He was really a very good businessman and knew how to manage the family business, his father. As for Yona, he was a happy child. He went to public school. He was jumping over rooftops. He was swimming in the big Khabur River. He also learned psalms with his grandfather, Ephraim, who used to pray aloud in the synagogue, and they used to say he spoke to angels. It was an idyllic age of innocence for him. The political situation was pretty stable for the Jews in Kurdistan, but not in Baghdad anymore at that point. So anytime they ventured outside the Kurdistani border, once they got to the Iraqi border, even as close as Mosul, they were already confronted with animosity for being Jews, for being Kurds, for being, especially for being Jews, obviously. And they, through emissaries who went to Kurdistan as well as to Baghdad, they were finally convinced to leave Kurdistan for the promised land. And all of them ended up leaving Iraq Kurdistan and Iraq in 1951. And of course, they had to sign that they were never coming back, and they had to give up all their property before leaving. Yona was 12, but his father decided to give his bar mitzvah to celebrate with his Kurdish friends, the Jews, the Christians. And when they left Zaho, opposite to the people who left Iraq, all the Kurdish friends, the Christians, the Muslims went and wept and wished them goodbye. And it was a very, very moving, parting. Of course, the same as the Iraqi Jews, they were denationalized and they were given a one-way ticket to leave, one-way visa to leave the country. they only could take one suitcase and 50 dinars. As I said, Yonah was searched, and when the Iraqi custom officer found 3 one-penny stamps in his pocket, he confiscated it and scolded Yonah for stealing Iraqi property. I told you this story before for the people who weren't here. By the time we were growing up in Baghdad in the 50s ourselves, we had no idea there were Kurdish Jews in Iraq ever, as though the history, their whole 2,700-year history did not exist. We used to get Christian domestic help from Zaho, from Al-Qosh, where they were, you know, the Prophet Nahum is in Al-Qosh, but we didn't know that growing up in Iraq, because we were not taught any of that. Our history was, the Jewish history in Iraq was totally obliterated in history books, and at school we had very little Jewish studies. We only studied in elementary, and we only studied the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. We were also not even aware of the prophets, Nahum or Daniel, or we didn't know their stories, unfortunately. Actually, I talk for myself. And I just found out that even the prophet Job is also buried in Halla, south of Iraq. So all those prophets in the Bible were really in Mesopotamia, in all of Iraq now. And I never realized what a rich heritage we had. It's a shame. As I said, the contribution of the Jews to Iraq, even in modern Iraq, building the modern Iraq in the 1920s and 30s were huge. But that too we were not aware of. We were just put down as Jews. Our whole existence was erased in the history books. When the Kurdish and the Iraqi Jews landed in the Promised Land, housing was a problem. They left comfortable homes, businesses, professions, only to be lumped together in tiny tents where sanitation was very poor again, no running water. They had to have food stamps. They had to line up for food, for water. They were exposed to the element. They were sprayed with fleet when they first arrived with in their heads. They were really treated as subhumans in a way, and humiliated in many ways. And that was the Promised Land. Yonah's father, grandfather, was, when he first knew he was going to Israel, he was dancing for joy, feeling he's going to go to the gold, paved gold, you know, synagogues and paved gold with gold. And he was so excited to be there, only to find out that he was considered an old man, that he was absolutely no use to the new country, that he was laughed at with his clothes, and his, you know, and the fact that, of course, none of them could communicate. They could not speak Hebrew or English. They only spoke Aramaic. Then on Saturday, he couldn't wait to go to synagogue. Now, he stepped out of the ma'bara to find people are smoking. Even in Kurdistan, even the Muslims used to not smoke on Saturdays for respect to their Jewish friends. But here, the Jews were smoking. And there was no synagogue nearby, their ma'bara anywhere in sight. He was totally, you know, demolished. I guess his morale was demolished. Now, as for Yonah's father, he had business acumen. He had the foresight to send money, to smuggle money out and to send it to Israel to wait for him when he arrived, which he did. He got a good amount of money that he raised with his brothers. And he was so ambitious that he decided to try to invest it. and he was duped with a bad business venture by an untrustworthy acquaintance that had gone to Israel a few years before from Kurdistan. And he lost his money, and he was not ever able to regain his footing or for a successful business. Anytime he saved and tried to invest, he lost again. So the father was demolished as well. He had shattered dreams. The promised land broke Yonah's father and grandfather, and a whole generation of Kurdish Jews that were morally trampled by really people who should have known better. As for Yonah, he continued his studies along with a few other Iraqi friends who he met in Israel. And as soon as professors started to studying Aramaic and teaching
Yvette, can I add something?
Yes.
The friends that Yonah studied with in Jerusalem included Eli Amir, the author of the bicycle.
The Dove Flyer.
Yes, they were the same group.
Yes, wow, okay. So they're still in touch, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And another one was Zilcha, who became a professor in
yes, it was
Boston.
Quite a group.
Yes. So again, okay. So now when he was studying there, and he found out that there was a professor studying Aramaic, and they started to consult him because it was his mother tongue. And they were very delighted to see somebody living the language. He found it, that's when Yonah found his calling. And he continued to fine-tune it and realized that till he earned his scholarship at Yale University in the States, along with the other friends he was studying with, like Zilcha. He moved to the States, which received him with openness, with innocence, with freedom. And he met his Jewish wife, he got married there, and after graduating, he was offered a job at the USCLA to teach Aramaic. And he found teaching was a bridge between his past and his present. In the mid-70s, Yonah started to translate sentences to Aramaic for movies like Oh God with George Burns. I don't know if he also helped in Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments. I'm not sure if he was already in the States, but I seem to have read that.
No, Ben-Hur was an earlier movie.
I'm sorry?
Ben-Hur was a much earlier movie.
What about the Ten Commandments? Maybe same.
I think in the 1950s.
Okay, so that wasn't him. Okay, thank you, Nazar. Yonah went back to Zacho. Okay, now in 1922, when the coalition troops from the States went back to Baghdad after the first war with Saddam, Yonah managed to go back to see Zacho. He found out many of the Jewish homes in Zacho were already in ruins, but the Kurds still called it the Jewish area, even though Saddam changed the name. It was derelict, it was full of squatters, the synagogues were already inhabited by families, the mikveh was asphalted and became an extra bedroom, but still it was considered the Jewish area. Still people in Kurdistan, some people remembered his father, his grandfather, they welcomed him, they were happy to see him, they invited him to a wedding that lasted a week. They used to say in Baghdad, Sab'a Lili or Sab'a Narat, they used to have weddings that lasted a whole week, 7 days, sorry. And that was the highlight, more or less, of Yonah's trip. He also saw that the huge Khabur River he used to swim in was really nothing but a little stream. The tea house he used to have coffee in became a little store for selling cell phones. Things changed, but he could trace where he more or less lived. He could trace where he played when he was a kid, he could trace it back, but of course, seeing it much older and much more derelict than before, and much smaller than before. Okay, and as for his son, and his son asked him, what did you find when you went? And he said, you visit for nostalgia, but you find nothing is the same. It makes you realize that life does not stand still, that nothing waits for you. The river keeps flowing, just like our lives. And as for Ariel, his son, he grew up in LA, where he was initially very ashamed of his father's lack of dress sense, his Kurdish accent, his lopsided hairstyle. He only realized that he should understand his father and his heritage once he had his own child. That's when he decided to write the book, My Father's Paradise. And the paradise for Yonah, really, for the father, was Zacho, because it was seen through his innocent eyes, where everything was okay, where life was good, where his family was making enough money to have a good lifestyle for Zacho. Anyway, Ariel convinced his father to go back to Iraq, to Zacho rather, because now Ariel was interested to see it with his father's eyes. So before going to Zacho, they had to stop in London for a seminar that the father was having in Cambridge University about dead languages. Amongst them was, of course, Aramaic, which Yonah excelled in. Ariel observed that while the professors were dissecting the language as though it was an autopsy in a lab, Yonah presented it as a living language where people told folk stories, Bible legends, they sang, they danced, conducted business in Aramaic, feasted in Aramaic. It was a very much of a living language with vivid imagery and history and poetry for Yonah, which he showed them. He brought Aramaic to life in the 21st century, just as Eliezer ben Yehuda reinstated the spoken Hebrew in Israel. Aramaic became a language to study, to enjoy, thanks to Yonah's hard work and perseverance. Now the trip to Zacho. I have to find the paper. Okay.
Lizette.
Yeah.
The father went back to Zacho to find his sister.
Wait. We're not there yet. No. Well, we'll get there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. We're not there yet. Okay, so they went to Zacho via Turkey. They were well received by the former guides and translators that met his father in 1992. We are now 2005, so that is about 8 years later. This time, many of the old Jewish homes were starting to get renovated, including all of Zacho. More stores for fashion were starting to come up. More boutiques were starting to come up in Zacho in 2005 because the Kurds, the industrious Kurds, really had some autonomy at that point in 2005. And the old coffee shop, as I said, the old tea shop was now still selling cell phones. Ariel was very exhilarated to step on Zacho's soil where his father really grew up. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if I'd go to Zacho, I'd feel like I went to the moon and back, because it's a place I would never imagine going to at this point. For me, coming from Iraq. And I assume many of us who went, at least when we left Iraq. Anyway, what happened was the shadow of his aunt Rivka Yona's oldest sister, which is Ariel's oldest aunt, who died, who was kidnapped by her Muslim wet nurse. Her name was Qamra. It still lurked in the shadow, especially for Ariel. He started to feel he wanted to have an Oprah moment, an Oprah Winfrey moment, where you find somebody people who were separated at childbirth and now they're together. It became a real quest for him to try to find her. And he dragged his father in with him, because the father always spoke of her, since the mother never got over it, even though the mother already had 12 children and lost 6 or 7 of them in childbirth and stillbirth. Some of them were stillborn, some of them died at age 1, some of them. But this Rivka for her was alive. She thought, she was hoping she's alive, even though she was kidnapped. Even though somebody, when the father went to look for Rivka when she was 2 months old, they said that this Muslim Qamra, the child died and she was embarrassed and she ran away. But for them, they still thought she might be alive. They still hoped they would find her. So especially Ariel, who was dreaming, because he is a journalist, he thought he could do it. They started to ask around. They even went to Tusani, which is a place where the Muslims were, where Qamra and her husband Hussein were. They used to sell qema. Qema was a cream, and from buffalo milk. That is really delicious. We haven't had that. I think they only have it in Turkey now, and maybe in north of Iraq still. They used to sell qema, and they left Tusani a long time before. But Ariel had to find her 70 years later. He had to find his aunt, because his father said when he went back in 1992, anytime he looked at an older woman who might resemble him, he would think maybe it's his sister. But Ariel took it to another extreme. It became a personal quest. So he started to ask people if they know about her. He started to give them money. And now that they see money is being given, people started to come out of the woodwork telling them, oh yeah, we've heard of this Jewish girl. She changed her name to Sarah. She had 2 kids, Ali and I don't know who. She became Muslim. And he kept trying to follow the leads. At one point, they told him he should go to Mosul, he might find her. Now, in 1937, when Yona's father was looking for her, when the girl was supposed to be 2 months old, it was already dangerous for Jews to go to Mosul. Now, 70 years later, again, he was told Kurds can't go to Mosul, Jews can't go to Mosul, Americans can't go to Mosul. Now Ariel is Jewish, Kurdish, and American. So they persuaded him not to go. And that's when he stopped the quest. He realized that enough is enough. Okay, so he did not go to Mosul. Okay, now just to summarize, the author feels that Zacho was the Eden for his father, where he could leap across rooftops, swim in the Khabur River, learn psalms from his grandfather. It was a place where Muslims, Christians, and Jews looked after one another. Zacho was his paradise, and it ended up very abruptly. He was too young to see it in any other light. Yona felt that in the class, teaching Aramaic, this language that lasted 4,000 years and is on verge of extinction, he was transmitting something from the past and giving it to the future. The past being a part of him, of his identity, but of course the future was for the future generations. He wasn't part of it. The author feels that his father did not really move on. He felt that instead he sublimated his homesickness into a career. struggle to reconcile the past and the present. And Aramaic was his only childhood possession, the only thing he still had as an identity. Aramaic survived for 4,000 years, and it is now nearly close to extinction because more and more displaced Aramaic speakers, including the Christians that spoke this language, like the domestic help we used to have, that used to come from Zaho and Al-Khosh. They used to speak this language called Athuri, which meant Assyrian, but of course we didn't know. And they were actually speaking Aramaic or Neo-Aramaic, which we understood, but we didn't give it importance because we had no idea what it was. I wish now that we had paid more attention. I try to remember words they used to say, like my qarira, which is hot water. They used to have an insult, which was which is, ash, sad, ash in your head or something. It's a terrible insult, but that's what I remember. Echlitha, which is good looking, and small things like that. But it's lost. And these people moved. I mean, some are living in Chicago, some went to Europe. I mean, even the Christians who spoke that language. So this language is definitely, unless you study it, it is definitely like Latin. It's obsolete. And to the author, again, he feels that the father's paradise, he conjured his own Zaho in Los Angeles, that he managed a series of substitutions, like the peddlers in Zaho's market were now the Mexican vendors selling oranges, the mud brick synagogues where elders urged the young to study psalms found their equal in his UCLA classroom. The 5-minute drive to campus was the 5-minute walk to Zaho's public school. In America, Zaho's riverfront tea house was now the Century City Espresso land. For my father, he says, America's cultural bouillabaisse mirrored the religious pluralism of Kurdistan. And that's where his father created his paradise, his Zaho. And that's more or less the story that summarizes the message given in this book.
Thank you, Lisette. Thank you.
There's a few people that wrote in the chat. Did you take a look at the chat to see if there were questions?
Could I make a comment?
Go ahead.
This is Joe Samuels from Los Angeles.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. I met with Yona Sabar in here in Los Angeles. Last time I spoke to Yona, his wife said that he had a stroke. And does anybody know his present condition or what's happening?
Sami,
Well, can I speak, Lisette?
Oh, yes, Nazar, sure.
Well, I'm in touch with Yona, not by phone, but by email, and he usually responds. I know his condition. He got a stroke about 9 months ago. I last saw him last June. We met in a restaurant in LA, in Westwood, very near UCLA, and he had just recovered from a heart attack. So, and then he got the stroke. So his condition, he's half paralyzed, but he can still, how do you say, function. He's slowly recovering, but at his age, this is not a very good condition to be in.
So for the people who missed the beginning, before I started the talk, when the customs officer in Iraq confiscated the 3 1-cent stamps of the King Faisal from his pocket when he was 12 years old, 70 years ago in 1951, he scolded him and yelled at him and told him, you're stealing Iraqi property. Nazar, Hayim Yahya, who just spoke to us, who met him last year, 70 years later, offered him the same 1-cent stamp. Here it is. You can see it here. Can you see it under Hayim Yahya? That's the 1-cent stamp that that they confiscated from Yona in 1951. So Nazar replaced it for him. It must have been a very emotional feeling for him, no, Nazar?
Yes, it was very emotional. He didn't expect that. So I said, well, I hope this is the end of the story and it doesn't hurt you anymore.
Thank you. Sami Surani, Lydia's iPad, maybe has something to say. Sami, can you please unmute Lydia's iPad?
Where is she?
Lydia's iPad. Here, the couple, Lydia's iPad near Evelyn.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Can you hear him now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to say that the Aramaic language was even spoken by the Jews of Iraq in Baghdad and in Babylon. But within generation, we accepted all kinds of phrases and languages that came, like the Turk, the Arab, the Persian, the Mongol, and so on. I want to mention also that in the book of Daniel, there were several chapters written in Aramaic and not in Hebrew, because that was the language understood by people. Now, the Jews of Kurdistan were a bit isolated, not like the Jews of Baghdad that were open to many wars and many changes. The Jews of Kurdistan were very friendly with the Muslim. The Muslim there, they had a great respect for the Jews and they didn't want to hurt them at all. And they lived in harmony and peace. It's very interesting, but you see the Iraqi government wanted to push the Kurds down. So all the ethnic group in Baghdad was in fact about the Kurd because they didn't want them to raise their head and ask for independence. That's what I want to add. Any questions? Oh, one thing.
I'd like to make a comment or two, not on what Sami said, except there, I don't know how many people know that Aramaic was Jesus's language. That's the language he spoke. I don't know if you mentioned it, but yes, okay. And people who go to Jewish school, kids who go to Jewish school, they learn Aramaic when they study Judaism. They study things, they, you know, a lot of the prayers and whatever else, it's in Aramaic. So they actually, in some part, it is still kept alive to some degree. Maybe not as a spoken language, but it is kept alive in terms of being able to read it, recognize it, you know. And okay, the other thing that I wanted to say is, what is manna? You said that they even served manna, or you had a dish. I know the biblical reference of manna that came from that God gave to the Jews who were, well, the Israelites who weren't even Israelites as yet, but the people who left Egypt and they found manna in the desert.
Yes.
But you said that you.
Yeah, can I explain? I can explain it to you.
Yeah, okay. What is
the manna used to be some kind of a sweet grit that landed on leaves on trees. And they used to collect it. and they used to boil it.
A white, like cotton-like substance?
I don't know the color, but I know some people say it's green. My sisters remember it being actually made in our garden, like they used to make it in Iraq. They used to collect it and boil it, but it wasn't in my days, but we still ate. I mean, they still sold manna. They added sugar and they added pistachio and other things. In the wilderness, they must have just eaten it off the leaves. Anybody knows better than me?
No, did you call it manna? Is that what it was called?
Gilda.
Hello.
Hello, Gilda.
Gilda, yes, go on.
Okay. I'll address the manna thing. In Arabic, we call it manna sama. In Farsi, it's gaz. If you go to a Persian store, you can buy it now.
Yes, they have it at Akhavan. You can buy it at Akhavan. It's called gaz. G-A-Z. Yes.
Gaz, delicious. Try it. Now, I had another question that I had written before. Mel Brooks's film, The Passions of Christ, was all in Aramaic. Lizette, do you or Joe Samuels, Joe, do you know if Yona had anything to do with the words in that film? Because
how late was it made? The Passion of Christ. I think he did. Yes. Yes,
he was involved in it. Yes.
Yes.
I would say you would know it. Okay.
He was. Yes.
And
can I give a short comment, please?
Okay, Gladys, go on.
Okay. I don't know if any one of you was there. A few years ago, the son, Sabar.
Ariel, yes, I was there. Yes.
Were you there? Was invited by
in the Cummings house.
Jewish library by Roxana. And I got an invitation for Women Learning Group. And they gave us a reserved seats. We were 50 from the synagogue. Women Learning Group, they wrote on each chair. And there were many more other Iraqis in the synagogue also. And it was a beautiful session. The hall of Gelber Hall was packed.
Yes.
And he was there and he gave a beautiful speech, Ariel Sabar by himself. It was very interesting to see him. Because
that's when
I happened to read the book a long time ago.
Yeah, that's when he said that the Assyrian Jews were brought in from Judea, north of Jerusalem, about 150 years before the Iraqi Jews who came to Babylon after the destruction of the first temple. The Iraqi Jews came about 150 years later, around, roughly. And the Assyrian Jews, the ones who stayed in the north, like where the Kurdistan, they were so cut off by the mountainous region that they kept the language Assyrian. Whereas us, the Babylonian Jews, eventually when the Arabs came, we switched to Arabic about 1,000 years ago, but still kept, I guess we still kept some Hebrew and writing the Hebrew. But of course, many of our prayers, like Hey Lahma Anya, the Kaddish, they're all in Aramaic. There are a few other prayers, I think, but at least I know for sure the Kaddish and Hey Lahma Anya are in Aramaic.
Odette, I have a question. I'm sorry, Odette was waiting online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, just very lovely. Lizette, you're awesome and great to see all the Montreal friends.
There are Israel friends and there's Nazar, there is Sabah Rashti and Olivia.
Oh my gosh, okay, that's great. Great to see you all.
And Evelyn, I lost her, my sister.
Yeah. Anyway, I did read the book a number of years ago. In fact, which is, I think it's very positive. It was recommended to us by another Canadian friends. We live in predominantly Ashkenazi community. So that was a plus to me that the Canadian Jews really liked it. And I had no idea about the Kurdish Jewish community in the north of Iraq. Yeah. Following that, a lot of book clubs here read the book, and as I said again, they're Canadian Ashkenazi. Why I'm saying that? Because obviously for us, it does hit a very soft spot, and we want to know more about this. But it's always good to spread it among the outside of the Iraqi Jewish community or even the Middle Eastern community. And it's true, I was also lucky to be in Montreal that year when Ariel Sabar came to give his talk, and it was very successful. I just wanted, it's anecdotal, I wanted to say that our son Daniel, a number of years ago, he's young, so he was traveling around Turkey, and he is very adventurous. He decided, he does know the history very well of us Iraqi Jews, how we left. So he hired a taxi and he crossed the border to Erbil at the time. He was gonna stay more than one day. I mean, we didn't know because we would not have allowed him to do that. But he was so happy to do that. It's just like he was in our shoes, and he took a lot of pictures. The main pictures also, because we always told him how men sat in the coffee shop and played sheshbesh and pauli and all that kind of stuff. And the men walked together arm in arm. He took pictures of that and showed it to his dad to say, look, life is still the same as you have left it. But Erbil looked beautiful and very clean. So that's the nostalgia I can give you.
Okay, thank you, Odette. Steve, you had a question.
Well, just a comment. There were other places in Iraq, in northern Iraq, Khanaqin, Erbil, Kirkuk. As a matter of fact, one of my cousins from Basra married a girl from Khanaqin in Israel. That's what I wanted to mention.
I would like to add my own experience of Kurdistan. At the age of 17, in 1947, I was in high school, Al-A'dadiyya school in Baghdad. And the school made a camp in Kurdistan. So something like maybe 20 boys from the Al-A'dadiyya school, we went, we took a train to Mosul, and from there we went to an area, old Jewish village called Sandor. Sandor was a whole Jewish area, Jewish village. Of course, at that time, they were very primitive in the sense that they don't have any modern tools like electricity or running water. So we camped there and we spent the whole week camping. And we met with the villagers, and we met with a couple of girls there. It's unfortunately, they came to Baghdad, and one of them, I found that she was in a prostitute house, and she was, a Muslim met her, married her, and sold her as a prostitute. In fact, I just want to let everybody know that I have just completed my book.
Bravo, Mabruk.
The Rivers of Babylon. And in it tells the story about Kurdistan and my life and how I smuggled back in 1949. It's on Amazon Books, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon. You know, the whole story of my escape, the Farhud that I experienced, then my life in Israel and Montreal and Los Angeles.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's amazing. Thank you for writing such a book. Steve and Sammy, you have to write books like that too.
I think
and Gladys.
I think Steve got the book. Steve, did you get the book? Steve, can you hear?
Steve is on mute. Steve Aker, can you unmute him, please? Can you unmute, Steve?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Did you
get, I ordered the book. I ordered the book from Amazon, but I didn't get it yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a long time ago. I know I've ordered from my brother and he got it. in there.
Maybe I'll get it today. I don't know.
It should be getting soon. I just got a few of them.
I'll let you know. As soon as
Anyway, I think you'll enjoy it. And thank you, Lizette, for the show, for this Zoom. It really brought memories and meeting everybody online.
Well, I thank Grace and the sisterhood, really, Sandra, and Françoise Babilo, who's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise, who really organized it. And it is being recorded, Françoise, you said?
Yes, yes.
Great, thank you. Nazar, I'm sorry, you had a story about Kurdistan. Can you tell us, please?
Yes, well, my story goes back to the 1920s. I would say that my family, my father, we had a special relationship with Hazem Shamdin, who was the chieftain of Zakho, and he had about 17 villages. And he was my father's best friend. My grandfather was in the parliament, and his cousin was also in the parliament, and so they knew each other. They were always together, and he used to visit us many times at home, and we used to go to Zakho and spend the hot summer months in their mansion in Zakho itself. And he's the cousin of the person who said that he was protecting the Jews in the book. Abdul Karim Agha is Hazem Beg's cousin. So we have a connection that goes back to the 1920s. Myself, the name Nazar, I was named after one of Hazem Beg's sons. Wow. And they take me as one of the family. So I was invited to one of the children 80th birthday 2 years ago, and so I traveled there. And
where there?
I was accepted
where
as
there?
one of the lost son.
But Nazar, where there? You traveled to LA or you traveled to Kurdistan?
No, there's nobody left in Zakho of the family. There were 13 children. Mm-hmm. The same mother. And
they all survived?
Well, those are the ones who survived, 13. And the birthday party was in Vegas. So it was a very plush party, and we enjoyed each other's company. And they had a very soft spot for Jews there. And the father, the Hazem Beg, was the protector of the Jews in Zakho.
In the book also, it's the same guy.
Yeah, and the story that my father told me is that when the Kurdish Jews left Zakho, they went and gave him their money and jewels for safekeeping, and he gave them that money back in Baghdad. So they were afraid of being robbed on the way. So
wow, that's beautiful.
He brought it back and gave them in the way. And one of the things that I found is that the daughter of Hazem, which I knew at Hikmah University, she was Hazar Shamdin, wrote a book about her father, and my father is also mentioned there. And this is the book.
Let's see. And whose picture is that?
That is Hazem in his
youth,
early days.
Yeah. So that's the father. That's Hazem Beg. That was the one in the book who was he was the protector of the Jews. You see,
yes.
This.
And he was my father's friend.
Yeah, they were protectors of the Jews, but the Jews also had to kind of do some services for him. But he protected them. He was.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It was thanks to him that the Jews could live there in total safety.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's nice to hear stories like that.
Yeah. One more thing is that what caught my attention in the Aramaic is that Aramaic sounds like a musical language. It has a musical tone, not like Arabic or Hebrew, which are very more strict.
Guttural, more guttural.
No, it is strict. It ends abruptly, while the Aramaic is continuous. It's like music.
Interesting.
Well, too bad it's dead.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe Yona revives it.
Yeah.
A little bit. 5, 10 people will learn.
Yeah, maybe.
Lisa, there's a question for you. I sent it through chat. If you look at the chat, someone asked a question.
I would like to say something unless somebody else would like to.
Yes, I have something to say.
Yeah, somebody's asking if Barazani, who is the Kurdish leader, is related. And I think Sami could answer that. I think there was a lot of names. Sami, Lydia's iPad, if you could open it. I think a lot of names were Barazani then. I think Barazani means strong, right? Barazani means...
Barazani is a village.
Barazan, ma?
No, Barazani is a village.
It's a village. It's a
Barazan, yes, it's a village. Can I say something?
Oh, Evelyn, yes. Okay, Evelyn, Mrs. Shaheen, yes.
Shaheen.
Yes. Go ahead. Wait. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. I'm unmuting you. Thank you. You're stuck now.
No, Evelyn, we can't hear you. You played with it. Daqiq, let Françoise do it for you. Don't touch it.
Okay.
I think Françoise can unmute you unless...
I don't know. She's. I cannot do anything right now.
Because we could hear you before.
Oh, that's it. That's it. It's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can, yes. What happened to Evelyn, my sister?
I don't know. Something went wrong. Okay, maybe someone else.
Sami, sorry, Sami was going to say something. Lydia's iPad, please.
Lydia's iPad. Where? Okay.
Up.
Yeah. I just saw you. Yes. That's it. Yes.
Okay, Sami.
Okay, I want to add that the Talmud of Babylon is written in Aramaic because the Aramaic language at that time was international language. Everybody understood that.
And it was written in 500 after Christ, right?
Right. It took 500 years to finish the Talmud. And it's written in Aramaic. Now, there are 2 accents in the Kurdish language. One is called Karmanchi and the other is called Sorani. The Jews mostly spoke the Sorani accent. And that's the way they talked. The Aramaic language, why it is different from the Hebrew? Because the Hebrew, when they changed the alphabet into Assyrian letters, the Hebrew language lost its original music. The Assyrian letters had different ways of pronunciation than the Hebrew. If you go to Toronto today, to Markham, there is a big church built by a Syrian community, and you find at the door things written in Hebrew letters. Those are not Hebrew, these are Assyrian Aramaic. It's a special accent of that language.
Thank you. Mrs. Shaheen, please.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we see you and hear you. Perfect.
Okay, I just want a little correction to Lisette when she said, we know nothing about the Jews on the north of Iraq before, but all helps, that domestic help, it used to be from the Jews from the north of Iraq until the 1950, when they all left to Israel. Then we start to have different people then. Otherwise, before they were all Jews that came
Yes.
to help us.
Of course, but us who
Yeah,
grew
you
up
came
in the
after.
50s, who grew
Yes.
up after 51,
Yeah.
didn't
I
even
just
hear about them, didn't even
but
know.
I just want to add, at the end of, before they left, we had a young girl of 20 years old. She came to help us. And she was very, very, very smart girl and very high class, status. And I was always wondering what happens to this girl when she went to Israel. Maybe she had the opportunity to be something and not in the domestic field alone. Okay, that's all I want. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Maybe her children. I had a nanny called Esther, and I used to call her Tiko. And I remember I was 3 years old when she left all of a sudden. She used to say, I'm leaving. And then I would cry and they say, no, she's not leaving. And they tell her, don't tell her. I remember I was like really 3 years old. And all of a sudden one day I wake up one day and she wasn't there. She left. And I always wondered about her. I think now it's too late, but I did ask a few years back, and I was told if I really want to find out about her, maybe if I give her name to the Babylonian Center or put it in Google, but I never got around to it. But every time I see a taxi driver in Israel who says he's Iraqi, I wonder if I tell him, what were the names of your parents? Thinking maybe I'll find Tiro.
Okay.
Yes, but as I said, we had no idea there were Kurds in Iraq. I mean, my generation, just a few years after they left.
Yeah, that's why you don't know about them.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying it's sad that we knew so little about the Jewish community, Jewish life, Jewish religion, Jewish prophets that were buried in Iraq. Here we are, bored in Iraq, hating it, etc., not realizing what a rich heritage we had there. We felt it's not ours. At least I couldn't wait to leave all my life because my sisters had left way ahead of me. And to me, this wasn't my country. And now, for once, for the first time, I'm beginning to be proud of our heritage, of the Iraqi culture, of what we contributed to Judaism, to Iraq. I'm proud of it now, but I wasn't then, unfortunately.
I would like to make a final comment, that we are proud of our heritage. We lived in Iraq. We grew up, like I grew up, believing that Baghdad was my home and Iraq was my country. But the Farhud shattered my belief that we were, at best, treated as strangers. At worst, we were traitors. And I would like to comment on the myth, or perhaps a lie, that the Jews in the Arab world, or in Iraq particularly, where I was born and grew up till I was 19 years old, that the Jews were treated equally. That is a myth and a lie. The Jews were treated at times good and at times bad. At the good times, it all depended on the leaders. We were always considered as outside the tribal leadership. And for example, in the 1920s, when you have King Faisal, who was very kind and understood and loved Iraq, he loved the Jews. He also met with Weizmann and believed that the Jews should go back to Palestine. But when he died, when his son Ghazi, who fiddled around with pro-Nazism, that is where the thing changed. So the Jews, they have never been treated as equal. They were protected, they were loved, some Muslim and Christians, but as far as equality, that is a myth and a lie.
No, they never were. I'm not saying they were treated equally, but there was a time in the 20s when the Iraqi Jews contributed, like Sasson Heskel, who was a minister of finance, who made sure that they levy the petrol with the price of gold. And then when World War II happened, Iraq didn't lose money because they had to be paid in the price of gold rather than the British pound that got devalued in World War II. And now the Iraqis are starting to say, Sasson Heskel did this for us. And mind you, if they see him, they would still kill him probably, but they are starting to sing the praises of Jews, maybe because we are mythical creatures for them now. I'm not sure if they find out if we want to go back and repossess our property, that they will be happy to welcome us back.
Lizette, here is the photo of King Faisal and Sasson Heskel, the finance minister.
Yes.
In my book.
Can you bring it a little more center? Yeah, now we can see, yes, now we can see the photo. A little higher. Yeah, now we can see it. Thank you. Yes, well, King Faisal I lived in my grandfather's house, the Shashua Palace, for whatever that's worth. We came out with nothing. Anyway.
We left everything behind, and we had a villa, we had maids, servants, and I stood in line as a homeless, penniless refugee with a tin plate, having food that I've never tasted before, like herring. We didn't know what's mashed potatoes. We didn't know salami. You know, we left our chicken, rice, and all the kubbas, and we stood up in line. But we made ourselves, and we refused to live in the past, and we stayed looking up to the future, and we all settled. And all of us, whether some people made more, some people made less, we're all happy where we are and grateful to be, whether in Canada, America, or Israel, or wherever we will be. And although I have nostalgia and admire my culture, and I never would ever dream to live back or to my children to go and live in Iraq. It's a cursed place.
Thank you. Gilda, you wanted a question, sorry. No, unmute, Gilda. Okay, Gilda, start again.
First of all, I have to add to Joe Samuel's, whatever he said, that there is something that he said to me 10 years ago is sticking on my fridge. He said, it's all in the attitude and the gratitude.
That's
bravo, Samuel, for that. Changes everybody's attitude.
Yes.
And the other thing is, here's Sandra Kuku, and she said, my father came across with the help of the Kurds. Of course, I know her family. Not only Sandra Kuku's family, a lot of the Jews came on donkeyback, on horseback to Iran because of the Kurds. And I guess their history is what made them so affectionate to us and helping us. It's amazing that to this day, they are our most helpful allies in the area. And I hope Israel can help them back at their time.
I hope so. They've been squished several times by the Iraqi regime, by the Turkish regime, by Syria.
By the Persians.
Yeah.
Everybody. So that's my 2 pence. Thank you.
Yeah, and Joe, I feel exactly the same as you, but I'm proud of us as Jews, as our contribution to Judaism, for our contribution to the Iraqi Jews, the Babylonian Jews, the Assyrian Jews. I am beginning to realize the contribution, but I would never want to go back. I wouldn't want to fly over Iraq. The only thing I'm sorry I can't see again is the prophets that we missed out, that they already destroyed half of them already.
I visited the grave of Jonah back in Mosul when I was about 8 years old. It's amazing. And of course, Yehezkel, we used to have the Eid Ziyara.
Yeah.
We go there, we have food and we ate as kids, 6, 8 years old. It was a great outing to visit the Eid Ziyara, the grave of Hezkel. Nabi Haskell.
Well, Nabi Haskell, thank God, is still there, but they already destroyed Nahum and Daniel.
Odette, please.
Okay, so yes, all of us agree. We have a very rich history. The Iraqi Jewish community is very ancient, and it comes from Mesopotamia. That's why we have the Talmud and the learning and the prophets. Although, in my stage in life now, I realize if you read any Jewish books or you listen to any Jewish speaker or any Jewish event, we are totally invisible. Jews of the Middle East are not there. They know about it when you ask them. Oh yeah, for sure. They know, oh yes, and there's the Yemenites in Israel. They give it lip service. Unless Israel and the West, the Jewish communities in the West, will start teaching from grade 1, from kindergarten, the same way they taught history of the European Jews, not to take away from it because it's a valuable history, unless at the same footing, it's not registering. The rabbis know about it. You never hear a rabbi say anything. Or they will say, oh yeah, I know, I have a friend from Iraq, or my in-law is married to an Iraqi, whoever, or Egyptian. They have not processed it, and probably they don't want to process it because it's a competition. I don't know what to do. Only people who have clout and only ministers and certain political people can move this. It's too late for us, but for the sake of our kids, because I do see continuity in some of the next generation. Israel has the culture there, yes, but it doesn't have the education, and it's not there, it's not visible. Thank you.
Lisette,
Yeah.
Lisette, first of all, I think Gladys,
something very quick.
I'm sorry, Gigi, you were saying?
yes, I think Gladys Daoud will attest to this, that in Israel, they are working at incorporating into the curriculum the history of Jews from various Arab lands. There's a concerted effort to do that. Isn't that right, Gladys? I remember the article. Where are you? Gladys Daoud. Can't hear you.
Can you unmute Gladys, please?
I am here. I am muted.
No, the
myself.
other Gladys. The other Gladys. Yeah, she's unmuted now.
Yeah, okay, the other thing is, there are two other things. One is, I was wondering if in Egypt, not Egypt, Iraq, did the Jewish community have to pay for, what is it called, the dhimmi tax?
No.
Dhimmi tax?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not in modern Iraq. There was no dhimmi.
No? Okay. And
but they had to pay the bribe. It was as much as bigger as the dhimmis. Everything was bribe to survive and to live well. So that's
there was also the thing that the Jews of Iraq were very soft-spoken. They didn't want to put themselves out there too much. And that's also owing to it, you know?
Right from the Arab land, because they didn't want to make waves.
Exactly.
Don't make waves. But to comment on Odette, I think every one of us could do something. I have been very active. That's what I wrote the book. I've been invited to talk to the Los Angeles City Hall. I talk to the Santa Monica College. Whenever I have a chance, I have a PowerPoint also to describe our culture.
Hey, look, my father wrote a book, which I worked with him, and it's going to be on TV in the United States very soon. We're all trying.
Yeah, but remember, all the children are getting married to, now it's mixed marriages. So who cares? I mean, in 2 generations, we're history. We're a footnote in history. Jews are Jews. Jews will be Jews. There's a mixture now. Israel now, half of Israel is Sephardi, but, they're intermarrying at this point. I don't think it's going to be that exclusive as Arab Jews or Ashkenazi Jews. I think it's a melting pot now.
You know that in Morocco and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. In Morocco and in Spain, the governments are working at trying to get the Jews back. You can get a free passport not a passport, yes, identity papers, a passport to Spain if you can prove that your ancestors came from there. And the King of Morocco has been trying to get Jews to come back for a long time now. So when the dust settles in Iraq, perhaps the same thing will happen. Of course, very, very few Jews took up on the offer to be a Spanish citizen, even if it means dual citizenship, and no Jews accepted the king's offer to come back to Morocco. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
The king in Morocco is wonderful, but you never know when he's going to be, how long he's going to stay. And that's why any Arab country is a little bit scary for us.
The reason why he's still there is because he supports the US and they're backing him.
For now. Sorry, yes, Grace.
I don't know about you, but unless other people have questions, I think you've really covered quite a bit of information. I want to thank you on behalf of the Sisterhood and the Spanish and Portuguese. If anyone has last questions, Lisette, it's up to you.
Sure. Sabah, you want to say something? Unmute yourself. Yeah, okay.
I just want to say how happy I am to see everybody, and I really thank you, and thanks everybody, and really we love you. Hopefully one day we meet.
Inshallah soon.
Inshallah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Now go outside and enjoy the sun.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for my friends, my family, and all of you for joining us. I am so happy to see Nazar and Sabah and Joe and Gilda and Violet Esser. Thank you. Hey, lady. Thanks for coming. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Francoise.